4 months, the bear was gone. He had once been a daily visitor to the cabin on the ridge, appearing like clockwork at dawn, lingering near the porch, never harming a soul. To Ellie, he wasn't just a wild animal, he was a friend. A quiet guardian. A creature who had, somehow, saved her life after her husband passed. Then one day, he vanished. She waited through spring. Then summer. Then the first snow. And just when she had stopped believing he'd return, he did. But this time, something was different. He wasn't alone. Cradled gently in his massive jaws was a human baby, barely a few months old, swaddled in a torn blanket, shivering but alive. No footprints. No cries in the night. No signs of where the child had come from. Only the bear. Only silence. And a mystery that would unravel everything Ellie thought she knew about the forest. The forest had gone quiet the day the bear disappeared. It was early spring, just after the melt. The pine trees still held their breath, and the creek near Ellie's cabin roared with snowmelt. She had stepped out with her coffee, expecting him as always, her silent companion of the last 3 winters. But the ridge was empty. No paw prints. No warm shape waiting at the edge of the trees. Just wind. Cold, whispering wind. At first, she assumed he was late. Bears wander. They roam. But days turned into weeks, and Ellie's porch remained untouched by those great padded feet. She kept putting out scraps. She kept talking to the trees. She left her cabin door cracked, as she always did. Nothing. It was like he had been erased. She remembered the first time she saw him, a year after her husband died. A storm had knocked out power, and she'd been chopping wood when the bear appeared, towering, drenched but calm. He didn't growl. Didn't run. He just watched her with those deep, knowing eyes. And somehow she understood. He wasn't there to harm her. In the months that followed, he became a part of her life. A shadow in the trees. A presence at twilight. Once he had even pulled her out of a snowbank when her ankle snapped during a hike, gripping her coat with his teeth and dragging her, inch by inch, back to the cabin. No one believed her. They called it trauma. Grief. Said she was projecting. But the bear came back. Again and again. Until now. By the time summer passed, Ellie had stopped leaving food out. By autumn, she stopped looking at the treeline. And by winter, she mourned him like she'd mourned her husband. Then, on the first snow of December, just as the light turned silver through the pines, she heard it. A low huff. A heavy footstep. And when she stepped onto the porch, she saw him. The bear. Thinner now. Wounded. But unmistakable. And in his jaws, held with the gentlest grip, was something wrapped in a torn blue blanket. He laid it on the snow at her feet. A baby. The bear laid the bundle down with startling care, his massive claws barely disturbing the blanket as he stepped back. Ellie stood frozen, barefoot in the snow, her breath catching in her throat. The blanket moved. A tiny hand emerged. Then a face, flushed red from cold but alive. A baby. No more than 4 months old. Crying softly, confused, blinking up at the pale morning sky. "Dear God," Ellie whispered. She dropped to her knees and scooped the child up into her arms, cradling it against her chest. The baby was icy cold, lips trembling. But breathing. Alive. "Where did you?" she gasped, looking up. But the bear was already backing away. His dark eyes lingered on her for a moment longer before he turned and disappeared back into the forest, his massive form swallowed by snow and trees. Gone, again. Inside the cabin, Ellie lit the fire with shaking hands and wrapped the child in every wool blanket she owned. She touched its hands, its cheeks, trying to warm it with her own skin. As the baby calmed, something inside her shifted. She'd been alone for years. Had no children of her own. Never imagined holding one. And now, this tiny soul had been delivered to her doorstep by a bear. She called the sheriff. They drove up the winding road an hour later, sirens off, tires crunching through snow. When they saw the child, they looked confused, then concerned, then skeptical. "You're saying a bear brought it to you?" one deputy asked, eyebrows raised. Ellie didn't flinch. "That's exactly what I'm saying." "From where?" "I don't know." They took the baby into their care, promising to contact nearby towns and hospitals. Said they'd look into any recent reports of missing infants. But as they left, Ellie could feel their doubt. They didn't believe her. They thought she'd gone crazy. But she knew what she saw. That bear hadn't wandered in by accident. He had come back on purpose. With a child. That night, Ellie sat by the fire, watching the empty porch. Snow drifted down in silence. The wind carried the scent of pine. And in her lap was something she hadn't noticed before, tucked into the folds of the blue blanket. A bracelet. Woven from fibers and leather. Handmade. And stitched into the cloth was a single letter. Not Ellie. The next morning, Ellie couldn't stop thinking about the bracelet. She turned it over in her fingers again and again. Leather band, small beads of bone and wood, and one embroidered name stitched neatly into the soft inside seam. Ember. Not a brand. Not store-bought. Handmade. A mother made this. Or someone who loved the baby enough to give her something personal, something rooted in meaning. But if Ember had been loved, how had she ended up in the woods? Alone? In the care of a bear? Ellie couldn't let it go. She drove into town, hoping the sheriff's office had news. A missing persons report. A hospital search. Anything. But the deputy shook his head. No child reported missing. No abandoned cars. No footprints. No signs of anyone else. It's like she appeared out of thin air. Ellie pressed. What about adoption agencies? Any home births? They promised to look. But she saw it in their eyes. That night, Ellie walked the edge of the woods. Lantern in hand, heart in her throat. Where did you go? She whispered to the trees. Where did you find her? And then, movement. To her right, between two ancient firs, the snow crunched. He was there. The bear. Still thin. Still quiet. He emerged from the trees like a memory made flesh, and again, he didn't run. He waited. Ellie lowered the lantern. You want me to follow you, don't you? He turned, took a few steps into the trees, then paused. Waiting. She followed. They moved through a narrow game trail, past frozen streams, beneath arching pines that creaked softly in the breeze. The deeper they went, the colder it became. And more silent. It felt sacred. Like walking into a forgotten church of snow and stone. Then she saw it. A hollow in the earth. A deep, rocky crevice like a sunken den. The bear stopped at its edge, turned to face her, and huffed once, low and mournful. Ellie peered over the rim. What she saw below took her breath away. Blankets. Cloth. Broken wood. A cradle. And blood. Frozen now. Faint, but real. A fire pit. Scattered supplies. A doll half buried in frost. Someone had lived here. Recently. A woman. A child. And they were gone. Ellie's heart shattered. Had the bear found the child after something happened to the mother? Had he taken Ember when no one else could? Saved her? She sank to her knees. You brought her out, didn't you? You were there when it happened. The bear didn't move. He just blinked. Slowly. With something that looked like grief. Ellie couldn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, the bracelet still in her hand, staring at the glowing fire as if it held the answers. The memory of that makeshift shelter in the forest wouldn't leave her. Someone had been living out there. A mother and her baby. Alone. In winter. Why? Why had no one come looking for them? Why had no one reported a missing child? She rose and pulled out an old box from her bookshelf, one filled with maps, local newsletters, and trail reports she'd collected over the years. Somewhere in the back, she remembered seeing a strange note from the year before. Something about a woman living off-grid. Avoiding authorities. She found it, tucked inside a pamphlet about wildlife tracking. A bulletin. Hiker claims to have seen a woman with a baby deep in Evergreen Ridge. No permanent campsite found. Woman avoided contact. Officials unable to locate. No name. No follow-up. But it was dated nearly 10 months ago. Ellie brought the pamphlet to the sheriff's office the next morning. Please, she said. Check your files. I think there was a woman living in the woods. Maybe she was in hiding. And I think the bear. I think he found her. I think he found Ember. The deputy gave her a long look before nodding. We'll look. Later that afternoon, he called. "Ellie, you should come in." They had pulled a report. An abandoned sedan had been found outside the park boundary 11 months ago. Inside, an infant car seat, clean but empty. Crumbs. A few small baby toys. One women's sweater. But no sign of struggle, and no ID. It had never been linked to any crime. Just filed away. They showed Ellie the photo taken from the car's dash cam, still active at the time it was abandoned. It was blurry, but she could make out a young woman, gaunt but smiling, holding a baby with a familiar bracelet on its wrist. "Do you recognize her?" Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "No. But I know the baby. That's Ember." And suddenly, it made sense. The mother had been running, from something. Or someone. She had fled into the forest, away from roads, from people, from systems. And when she couldn't go on, the bear had taken the child. Ellie went home and stood on her porch, scanning the trees. She didn't expect him to come again. Not now. He had done his part. Saved a life. But as the wind swept through the pines, she saw him, just a flicker, at the edge of the forest. Still watching. Still silent. Still guarding. Winter deepened. The snow came heavier now, blanketing the hills and burying every trail the bear had once walked. The woods became hushed again, still, sacred, and sealed beneath white. And though he didn't return to the porch, Ellie knew he was still out there. Watching. She started leaving notes. Tucking them under pine cones. Whispering stories into the forest like prayers. And one morning, beside a spruce at the edge of the trail, she found something she hadn't left. A necklace. Simple. Wooden. Carved into a tiny heart. A child's keepsake. It wasn't Ember's. It had belonged to her mother. Weeks passed. Ellie received word that no one had stepped forward to claim Ember. No relatives. No leads. So, with trembling hands, she filed for custody. And by spring, Ember was home. Official. Protected. Loved. Ellie often sat on the porch, telling Ember stories as she toddled in the grass. About animals, the wind, the trees, and about a bear who once dragged a broken woman from a snowbank and reminded her how to feel again. And one evening, just as dusk painted the treetops gold, she saw movement beyond the ridge. Large. Familiar. The bear. He didn't approach. Didn't stay. He just stood there, watching. One final time. Then he turned and disappeared into the forest for good. The story of the baby in the snow made its rounds in the papers. They called it strange. Unbelievable. A bear that rescued a child? A woman who claimed it was true? A mystery mother lost to time? But Ellie never needed anyone to believe her. Because every night, when she tucked Ember into bed, she saw it in the little girl's eyes. The wildness. The strength. The truth. And sometimes, when Ember stared quietly out the window at the trees, she would whisper, "Mama said the bear had a name." What was it? Ellie would ask. Ember would smile, small and sure. Protector.